Before we really dive into this explainer, we've got to ask a pretty massive question about the future of our planet, and honestly about the devices sitting in our pockets right now. Why does a continent with all the right minerals in the ground to power the green energy transition still struggle to actually build the mines? It is absolutely one of the most fascinating and frankly frustrating paradoxes of the modern global economy. And figuring out the answer, well, that's literally the key to unlocking a sustainable future for us all.
So, welcome to the explainer. Today, we're going to unpack a brilliant 2026 presentation by J.A.H. Campbell. As a managing director, a geologist, and a mining entrepreneur, he completely breaks down exactly how geological potential actually transforms into hard capital. Because, guys, this isn't just about finding rocks in the dirt. It's about that incredibly complex, wild journey from a raw discovery all the way to a fully financed operational mine. Here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the critical minerals bottleneck, move into Africa's conversion problem, discuss how policy is now bankability, lay out the 5 dimensions of investability, and wrap up by looking at Botswana as a working model.
All right, let's jump right into part 1, the critical minerals bottleneck and this massive global demand surge. So the sheer velocity of the market right now is staggering. According to the 2024 IEA Global Critical Minerals Outlook, lithium demand growth alone is sitting at 30%. 30%! Now, think about that for a second. If you're building a software app, 30% growth is, a pretty good Tuesday. But for a physical commodity, one that requires heavy earth moving, insane logistics, and thousands of workers, 30% annual growth is absolute hyperspeed. Meanwhile, other vital minerals, we're talking nickel, cobalt, graphite, rare earths, they're seeing demand growth right around 7%. The trajectory is just incredibly clear here. The real bottleneck globally is simply trying to keep up. Even with all the announced projects, we are still looking at material implied shortfalls in copper and lithium by 2035. But here's the reality check, right? You might think a massive supply shortage means endless free money being thrown at any mining project out there. Actually, scratch that. It's the exact opposite. Scarcity absolutely does not equal free money. Capital is incredibly disciplined and it aggressively hunts for credible, completely de-risked supply chain nodes. So the ultimate reward, the real premium, flows directly to the jurisdictions that can turn this rising demand into bankable, investor-credible projects the fastest. Which brings us to Section 2, Africa's conversion problem. It's the classic battle of potential versus execution. Africa's strategic relevance to the global supply chain is just undeniable. For a little context, a massive 73% of the global mined cobalt production back in 2022 came directly from the Democratic Republic of Congo. That is literally the exact mineral keeping the battery in your smartphone and your electric vehicle alive right now. And it doesn't stop there either. South Africa is strategically critical for platinum group metals and manganese. You've got Guinea being a major player in bauxite for aluminum, plus Mozambique and Madagascar holding significant natural graphite supplies. So the geological endowment, it is definitely there. But here's where we hit a massive, massive wall. Strategic relevance is not the same thing as retained value. Finding the minerals in the ground isn't actually the primary issue anymore. The real bottleneck is what Campbell calls the conversion problem. Think of it kind of like having the perfect blueprints for a billion-dollar skyscraper, right? But you have no construction crew, no city permits, and absolutely zero banks willing to write you a check. That is the conversion problem. It's this incredibly difficult operational step of turning raw mineral potential into projects that can actually be understood technically, permitted legally, financed commercially, and executed structurally. It's all about optimizing the time to understanding, the time to permit, and ultimately the time to capital. Let's move into Section 3. Policy is now bankability. These are the new rules of global supply chains. So international policies are completely changing the game right now. They're acting as the ultimate gatekeepers for capital. Take the EU's Critical Raw Materials Act. They've set some seriously rigorous benchmarks for 2030. They want 10% domestic extraction, 40% processing, 25% recycling, and, this is the big one, a maximum 65% dependence on any single third country. Add to that incredibly strict ESG due diligence. Investors nowadays demand provenance tracking. That means they need to trace a specific mineral from the exact patch of dirt it was dug out of, all the way across the ocean to the final battery inside a car. Supply chain rules and structured disclosures are completely dictating what actually gets financed.
And this brilliantly illustrates our core thesis today. You could be sitting on the absolute greatest geological deposit in human history, but it means literally nothing if your project cannot function as a compliant, trusted node in a global supply chain. You have to have a highly credible route from the raw concentrate all the way to the market. So policy compliance? It's no longer just a nice-to-have bonus, it is the very definition of bankability.
All right, Section 4, the 5 dimensions of investability. and how to survive the dreaded orphan phase.
Before we look at the solution, we've got to confront this absolutely horrifying timeline. Across 127 mines, the average time from initial discovery to actual production is 15.7 years. Over a decade and a half just to get a mine running? I mean, imagine investing millions of dollars into a project today, fully knowing you won't see a single ounce of product until almost 2040. That immense delay absolutely destroys project value.
So where does all that time actually go? Well, a massive chunk of it is spent in what the industry calls the orphan phase. This is basically the treacherous valley of death right after initial discovery, but before a confirmed resource is fully modeled out. This is where junior mining companies just bleed millions of dollars trying to establish what the project actually is, all while fighting thin treasuries, weak data, and brutal administrative delays. This orphan phase is exactly where geology either fails entirely or succeeds in becoming real capital.
To survive that orphan phase, a project has to perfectly align these 5 critical dimensions of investability. Number 1, technical credibility. You need robust confidence in the actual ore body and how you're going to extract it. Number 2, administrative navigability. This means predictable licensing and fast time to decision from governments, so you aren't waiting years just to drill a single hole. 3, fiscal predictability. Tax terms that investors can actually model out for the next 20 years. 4, infrastructure realism. You need real power, flowing water, actual roads, not just an optimistic line drawn on a map. And finally, number 5, capital architecture. Funding structures that are matched perfectly to the project's evolving risk.
When we weigh pure endowment up against true investability, the takeaway is pretty stark. Endowment is essentially just a lottery ticket. Sure, it gives a country strategic relevance, but it often completely fails to deliver broad-based economic transformation. Investability, on the other hand, that is the active process of optimizing the time it takes to understand the geology, permit the site, and secure the capital. Endowment is absolutely necessary to start the game, for sure, but investability, that's what actually wins it.
Let's look at Section 5, Botswana as a working model. This is our proof in the Kalahari.
Botswana is out there actively proving this model in the real world. Technically, they have the rich Kalahari copper belt. Administratively, they've built out public digital tools like a modern cadastre, which, by the way, is basically a transparent public map of who owns what mineral rights. And that drastically reduces friction for incoming companies. Fiscally, they've boosted their standing in global mining investment indexes. Now look, it's not perfect. Field-level consistency and slow time to decision are still lingering weaknesses. But Botswana has built enough institutional credibility to make conversion observable and highly actionable for global investors.
The Khoemacau copper-silver mine in the Kalahari is their ultimate operational proof point. It's currently sitting right around 53 kilotons of copper a year, with highly credible expansion targets aiming to scale that all the way up to 130 kilotons. It demonstrates perfectly that when you get the right investability dimensions in place, a copper-led, operationally proven project can truly thrive in Africa and attract serious global capital.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. Africa undeniably has the minerals in the ground to save the planet and power the future of the global green energy transition. The Earth has already done its job, but the true winners of the next decade won't be the ones who just sit on the best geology. It will be the jurisdictions and the investors who have the speed, the structure, and the administrative discipline to actually finance it. So as this green energy race accelerates to incredible speeds, who's actually going to step up and build the bridges to get it out of the ground? Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep looking for those trusted nodes in the supply chain.